Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this first day of CDCon 2021, the annual event at the CD Foundation. I'm so excited to be here with our three amazing panelists for this session on the impact of continuous delivery on digital transformations. These three amazing panelists drive change, success, and culture across teams, industries, and organizations. And so I would love for them to be able to share all of their insights on how they are using the continuous delivery ecosystem and how it's helping them drive digital transformations. Anyway, I'd love for everyone to get the chance to introduce themselves alphabetically. But before that, I do want to mention that this is an interactive session. So please ask us your questions. There should be a chat on the side of the platform, and we will get to them at the end of this session. So without further ado, my name is Tiffany Jachja. I am your moderator for today. I am a technical evangelist at Harness. I am also the Continuous Delivery Foundation Outreach Committee Chair this year. So I'm so excited to be having these three amazing people join us. If Bob would like to kick us off, please tell us more about what you do at Digital Turbine and how are you shaping DevOps culture and values across organizations and within your team.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Bob Jones. I've been a software engineer for about 15 years now, and mainly been on the engineering side of the house, and really started to get an interest in DevOps early on in my career. Specifically, it was about developer productivity. I joined Digital Turbine as a software architect about a month and a half ago. So brand new, completely different role than I've ever been used to. But we do have, I do have a lot of hooks into that CI/CD organization at Digital Turbine, and we have a lot of challenges. It's pretty interesting, and I'm not sure if it's specific to the way that the software that we do. But it would really be interesting to hear from you guys as well as some of your experiences with this specific way of operating. But in terms of influence, it's really just like right now we're going through this big transformation. Like we don't know what tools to use. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that some of the software that we write is firmware. And it's very interesting because our release cycle is basically we have to do once a quarter because of the devices that we pair with. So how exactly do we, do a digital transformation? How do we do continuous delivery with something like that? And it's pretty huge challenge, but that's me.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing a little more context into how continuous delivery is also bleeding into not just the software industry, but also firmware or hardware. And I think that's really interesting and something that we've been seeing in the DevOps space as well. I'd love to turn over to Eric and let us know what you do at Liatrio.
Hey, Tiffany, thanks for having me. Excited about the panel as well. So as Tiffany said, I'm Eric Chapman. I'm a principal here at Liatrio. Liatrio is a DevOps and cloud transformation firm. Simply put, we help organizations deliver software faster. So I think being at the continuous delivery to talk today is super exciting for us. How we help specifically, we cover the gambit from advisory strategy, helping form where teams are going, and more importantly, hands-on keyboard engineering help as well. So we used to say we're the boots on the ground. That's sort of in a different turn starting 2020. But boots on the ground, both physically and virtually, however the environment may be. I would say our superpower and where I think would really is important in delivery is enablement and really understanding. So the technology I always say is the fun and easy part, but really it doesn't matter what technologies you use if you can't actually deliver your software, deliver your value, your ideas out faster. So that's sort of where we shine. But yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric. Lindsey?
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey Yeadon. I am an Agile Transformation Lead with Open Innovation Labs at Red Hat. I've been here for almost 2 years, and I really do enjoy what I do at Red Hat. I was brought in about 2 years ago to help build out our transformation product. We really weren't sure as a part of Open Innovation Labs. We had a residency model. We weren't really sure kind of what's next. We knew there was a step. And that's one reason that myself and some other transformation leads were brought on is that, okay, what now? I had done transformations. Most of them, I will be honest, failed. And one of the biggest reasons is because I am more on the process side. So when I say I'm an agile transformation lead, I know technology. What I say is I know enough to be dangerous, not to be helpful. I am pretty much on the ways of working and the organizational change and the process side of it. So that's where I worked previously with different organizations to help them transform. And I'll be honest, like I said, most of them were not successes. And that's one of the reasons why I really liked Red Hat is that it marries process with technology. Where process can ebb and flow, technology, you need to have it anchored there. And that's really where, when we talk about digital transformation and just transformation in general, you have to have both the process side and the technology side. So to me, continuous delivery goes hand in hand with a long-lived and successful transformation. I've been in this space. I was just looking at my resume and calculating the number of years. I was like, oh, it's been about 10 years. No, it's been about 15 or so, working in technology and project management. And then within the last 10 years, really specializing in that agile space. Well, now, 10 to 12 years. And then really in the last about 7 years, focusing on transformations, that it was great to kind of get the agile word out there. Okay, now what do you do with this? Now that people had an understanding of agile and scrum and some of those, and even some of the scaled frameworks, it's now really about, okay, how do we change all of our ways of working? How do we kind of take some of these principles and go to the next level? And that's really where I've been focused the last 5 to 7 years and love it. And love so much, that we are pairing it with process. So it's not just process, it's not just technology, but it's both. And both of those together is going to make a transformation actually be long-lived.
I love that. I love where you brought in this concept of long living or everlasting digital transformation, because things do change, right? That's the nature of technology. And I would love to get into that some more. I do want to jump into the heart of this conversation and the first question that I have for you all today. And this touches on the really outcomes that organizations are trying to achieve today. So we know that many organizations today are trying to achieve better software delivery faster. And this is why we see things like GitOps and all these practices really emerging today, and why we even have CD Foundation hosting this annual event around CDCon, right? And so my question goes around process as well. So how do you prepare organizations for change? And how do you get them so that they are in this right headspace of being able to tackle some of the challenges that are associated with improving their processes? I'd love for whoever has the biggest opinion to grab the mic. It's a free for all in this panel.
I mean, this is the hardest thing, right? When I think of digital transformation, it's not necessarily technology, it's changing people's minds. So you've really gone through a transformation when people start thinking a completely different way. And at least in the experience that I've had, the hardest part with that is gaining trust. It's establishing trust, establishing those relationships. And honestly, that can make or break the whole initiative. When I worked at a really big financial institution, for example, and we wanted to bring in some more DevOps, some culture to the organization. But what they ended up doing is they created a whole DevOps organizational unit for the tools and the processes. And they created this like shared model. And what was really interesting is that people didn't trust that team to actually help facilitate that digital transformation. I've seen in a different example at a startup that I work at, they were able to come in and actually say, hey, like look at all this measurable pieces of data that we can actually go. And they started these small like increments of change. And then people started to actually think, oh, I can make this change and deliver it to my customers really fast. And slowly we built trust to the point where we could actually really start changing the way people thought about delivering software.
And yeah, when you talk about culture, I mean, that's everything. And kind of how when I first are, engaging with a company, and typically the very first time that you're engaging, it's with executives, it's with people that are like, okay, that we see a need for a change. And so I've gone in and I've told them, it's like, listen, we can do this. This is going to be a long journey. It is not something that's just going to happen overnight. It's not going to, we're not going to be able to affect change in the way that you want it to be. And they can come down on high and say, all right, this is what we're doing now, and just kind of spell it out. But then that's just going to create churn, create turmoil, and that's going to fracture the trust that is there. And kind of how I put it into perspective is that you have to look at an organization as a ship. The larger the organization, the larger the rudder, and the larger it's going to need to be able to change. So if you look at something like a startup that you're talking about, and I've been lucky to work with some great startups and they're hungry, they're ready for change, and they're ready for knowledge. And it's just like, all right, let's kind of do all these things. One of the bad things is that let's do all these things at once. Well, you can't. In order to be able to turn in the correct direction, you need to have small changes, that kind of gets you in the way to go. Otherwise, you'll just be kind of going in circles, chasing yourself, with that rudder, with every little change. And then you look at some of these other larger organizations, like one I'm working with now, and Bob, you had the luxury of working with them as well. They're a huge corporation. So let's look at the size of a cruise ship, and how much effort is it going to take just to change that just a little bit, change their direction just a little bit. And that's one of the things, is that, and to not be discouraged, because it's going to take a lot of, action to be able to just move just even a little bit. And that's one of the biggest things. And that's where letting people know is that, we'll be able to see some change, but for the entire organization, it is going to take time, but don't give up. Let's put in that effort. Let's start those discussions, start those things. And then once we start going, down one direction, we may see that we need to change a different direction too. So it's, that's one thing, is that I always ask, like, we have to be ready to embrace change, but then to make sure that we're not changing too much either, because then that's when you can have the circle effect.
A lot of great stuff there from both Bob and Lindsey. So don't have a ton to add on. I just think it comes down to, in addition to what they've added, really, I think about three things. First of all, it's important to gain the visibility of what's going on. So using value stream mapping and value stream management to visualize the flow across the continuum. And you can narrow that in as small or as large as you want to go. But letting that drive the direction. You sort of alluded to kind of having some North Stars and some things you want to focus on, Lindsey. So like the value stream map, let the ground reality of where the pain points are drive what you focus on. I think the next one is metrics and outcomes. So it's great. It's a blessing and a curse following digital transformation or an agile transformation, this point of DevOps transformation. All of those words are undergoing semantic diffusion. I think Martin Fowler rather coined the terms where, the longer they're around, the less, they get watered down, right? So as Lindsey alluded to, like following some difficult or transformations that haven't delivered the promises, you're sort of either coming behind the things, or if you're lucky enough to be at the beginning, you sort of get this honeymoon hall pass of these are what we're going to do, but without measurable metrics and outcomes to say like this is what's going to be accomplished. I think, and that's a difficult thing to cover, but I think setting those up is key. And the last part, probably even before the metrics, is just setting expectations. Just like Lindsey was saying, this is a marathon. This is not going to happen overnight. But just be in it for the long haul. And how do you build the community around it? How do you crowdsource like all the smart people in the organization? Like Bob said, not having a small group of people. How do you bring other people in? So, yep.
Awesome. I love that insight, and about having a North Star, right? Being able to focus on those outcomes, because it may take you, it's not the snap of a fingers. It may take you several months, if not years, to get to where you want to be. And I think that really does speak to the evolution and just sort of the nature of DevOps as well, is that we're incrementally improving, and every day we can introduce new ways of working or improve our processes over time. And I really love that takeaway. So my next question is about capturing the evolution of technology, because we do know that things change and we do know that technologies change. And so how do you really capture or drive transformations so that they are helping businesses reach their outcomes, reach their goals? I am curious, like, how do you balance these organizations that really want to innovate and maybe, throw in new technologies, try service mesh, go into these new emerging bleeding edge technologies almost. And how do you balance that with the stability and the repeatability of software delivery?
So I'll start off that, and before you even said the word innovation, I'm like, oh, innovation time, like you have to, but then how do you kind of do the business as usual, keep the lights on while still being able to balance that with innovation time? I have been lucky enough to work at two of the companies. One, I was working on an agile transformation, and it was a smaller company. So it was only about 700 employees total, and about, well, it grew when I was there, but 50 to 100 IT employees. And this was one of the things is, we really wanted, and we were working on this huge monolithic piece of software. I don't even know how crap software, stuff that it was, not COBOL, not that far back, but it was, if you can just imagine this kind of clunky type thing. And then as we fixed it, it was just kind of putting, more Band-Aids, putting more and more pieces on it. But it was this huge, monolithic, legacy type code. And it was literally putting, lipstick on a pig or Band-Aids on it, gushing wound, that type of thing. And it was like, we were always struggling to like, how can we even think about doing something more cutting edge, more innovated with this, while we're still having to do all these other, improvements just to, have business as usual. So this is where we ran 2-week sprints, and we ran them Wednesday to Thursday. So Thursdays were our sprint ceremonies, or, all of our scrum ceremonies, all that kind of stuff. We would do that, and we would release, that evening. That was the way that we could do it. That was the downtime that we had to have and that we had the agreement upon. So we ran it that way. So the idea is that Friday, after we had our release, that was innovation time. You could do whatever you wanted to that way. It was completely self-organized. The only thing that we're going to ask is that as a part of our normally scheduled sprint demos or sprint reviews, is that once a month, so every other one, you share what you have been doing. And then we had a regular cadence. So it was like, you can have this time to do whatever. And this was the way that they could look at new technologies. All of a sudden, somebody came up with an idea using, I think, Docker and Rancher, into where they actually took some of that, a piece of that monolithic, legacy system, and actually broke it down into some microservices, and then, using containers and all that kind of stuff. And they presented it. It was like, oh my goodness. And it was like, okay, we can do this. Well, guess what? Now we can start even planning that we could do something else. The biggest thing is that nobody even had the idea that this was going to be possible, but somebody was actually able to show it. And that right there just kind of sped that up. And then it was, okay, maybe we need to look at 2 days. So that really is something that kind of got people's juices flowing. And there were so many fantastic things that were able to come out of that. And that it just inspired the people there too, and to wanting to do better. And then it grew out of the IT organization, that then we've asked them to partner with people in the business, like go out and actually talk to your potential customers, find out what they need. So then we had people that were on, the calls, we had a call center and everything else, but they were using our legacy system. They would actually come in and they would start presenting during our demos, and they would be like, yep, we did this. And it was awesome. And then at another company, we ran SAFE. So they're supposed to be built in time for innovation and planning. If anybody's ever done it, that's the last thing that gets pushed off. And we were seeing that again. And so our CEO, he was like, we want to do 4 sprints. So eight weeks, PIs. That's what he wanted. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, what about this innovation and planning? And he was like, well, we just have, we have all these deadlines. We need to get this out. I'm like, but this is huge. And he was like, all right, you give me 2 back-to-back PIs. I'll give you a PI. And it's like, what do you mean you'll give me a PI? And he goes, I'll give you an entire PI. And I go, 8 weeks. And he was like, yes. And I go, for what? And he goes, innovation, to do whatever, the dev teams want to do. And I'm like, are you sure? And I was like, I need this in writing. He goes, hold on. No. So he's like, I'll do 4 weeks. We'll do a half an iteration. So 2, and then, 4 weeks for them to do it. So that's an entire month. In that month of time, we saw an absolute reduction in the number of bugs. Like it was in, but then they were able to put things into place. The ownership that the devs then felt on the code that they were delivering, even if they hadn't been the initial people to touch it, was insurmountable. And they, all of a sudden, we went from, it was a company that did nursing simulations. We went to just being able to interact with one patient to where we could interact with multiple patients. This was all new technology that came out of this innovative, time that was dedicated just for that and allowing them to work. And then it was, oh my goodness. So then we were able to spit it right back into the next products that we were doing for the next PI and just seeing people grow. And that was fantastic. And then it's that balance though. You have to find that balance. But if you can get that one thing that will allow you to kind of see, the new technology, and being able to do that will show the need for time to be able to do that. That yes, we'll still do the business as usual and we'll keep the lights on, but we have to, allow for some of that innovation too.
Yeah, there's so many different things I want to touch on, but the one of the failures that I was a part of at the big financial institution, the way that innovation sort of happens. So there's business as usual innovation, and this company had multi-billion dollar, almost $1 trillion company. They have successes, right? There's a lot of innovation. They do it business as usual, and then when we add something, when they want to bring things out, faster, what they would typically do is they would hire a bunch of consultants. They would say, hey, I can throw 100, 200 people at this problem and we'll get it out faster. And, they had this really interesting idea of moving things to the cloud, and they wanted to come up with this new set of products and offer it. They wanted to capture a whole different market segment, or business segment, I guess you could say, like small to medium businesses. I can't get too much into the details, but they ended up hiring, I don't know, 200 to 300 people maybe total to do it, and it was a big failure. And I think a lot of it had to do with the mindset, right? People didn't have experience with doing DevOps. People didn't have experience, and not only that, they engaged 40 different teams. So we had the existing organizational structure of this company that sort of played into it. And what was really interesting with what Lindsey was saying was that it didn't seem like you had those organizational structures to sort of, you kind of broke down those walls of the silo in some ways in order to make those changes and in order to move forward. But I consider that a failure because the promise is that we were going to be able to deliver this prototype to the market faster than BAU, but it was never BAU. It was actually slower and way more expensive, and it all had to do with the personnel. Yep.
Also, just 2 quick points for me to add. A lot of rich insight there. Really, two things. I think one, really just sum up what both Lindsey and Bob said, is really the need for creation of margin and space for engineers to innovate safely. And that, take that literal as much as you can say on margin and space. You need some time, but you also need environments to experiment in that aren't tied to critical systems, that create that safety to do that. And Lindsey talked about some strategies on how creating using the IP sprint and things like that to help there. And then the other part, and this sort of touches on what Bob was saying, is the using the modular design patterns and things like that you traditionally think about, like microservice design patterns, 12-factor app. Use those on your platforms as well. To get back to your question, Tiffany asked about how you can ingest new technologies and don't have to reboot everything. If you build even your pipelines and your pipeline components, we've seen a lot of success with purpose-built containers to back pipelines. So what that would mean would be, for something like static code analysis, you'd have a container that just does that. And that way, when you want to switch out your tool for SAST or scanning or whatever the case may be, you're just changing one container, not impacting the whole entire flow of the pipeline. So just using those sort of modern engineering practices on your platforms internally as well. And I think that helps you pivot a lot more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric, for recapping some of the really big core concepts in there that Lindsey was sharing and Bob was sharing through their experiences, right? And I love the idea that we're building in time for innovation because that's so important. Like we've seen amazing technologies come out of the space from people innovating. Like, for example, Google, they have their Fridays off, right? And from that, people have started really amazing technologies. I mean, Kubernetes was one of those too. And so that really goes to speak like lengths about what it's like creating a safe environment for people to be able to innovate and try these new things, right? And in a way where it doesn't lead to failure, right? This thing where it's like, wow, we invested so much time into innovating that we somehow missed the mark on actually delivering what it is that we had set out to deliver, right? So I think that's really important. And I love how you brought in CI/CD because that's actually my follow-up question. I know we're wrapping up here, but my final question for you all is where do you see organizations shifting towards in terms of your digital transformations? Where is the focus today? And where what are some takeaways that organizations can use to be able to solve some of those challenges?
Yeah, I would love to take this one first. I'll be mindful of time because I can get really carried away with both of these because there's a lot of stuff to cover here. But I think there's two things that I've observed being in and around DevOps, pretty heavily. I would say the last 5 or 6 years have been focused on how like infrastructure automation, shifting left, your functional testing and non-functional testing, all those things. But to truly achieve continuous delivery and large complex organization, highly regulated organization, think about a financial institution, state and local governments, U.S. governments, things like that. You really have to think about the release management, the risk, the audit, the permit to release, permit to operate, authority to. There's a whole lot of nomenclature around all those things. But how do you take those concepts and things that are reviewed in the cab, and how do you build that into the pipeline? How do you start taking those insights? So we've seen it had a lot of success. We've helped the top 5 banks sort of start building those. We call it policy as code, but how do you start to take those checks and has binary is being promoted from dev up to production, has an engineering delivery team. I can see at any state real time, how my binary is going to measure up to the standards that has to go to production instead of waiting for the 11th hour to be told that, there's a security issue or whatever the case may be, or I'm failing a risk. I can address it then and there in the backlog. And I would say it's important that you build your automated governance in such a way that it's a non-human digital handshake. Otherwise you're going to lose the credibility from your friends in the audit organization. But audit risk is important, but how do we shift that left? How do you shift the cab left is what I'm talking about here specifically. So I think that to me is the future of really to continue to achieve continuous delivery in a large complex organization. You have to think about that. And the last part, I think it'd be remiss in a GitOps summit to not talk about GitOps. And we've seen a lot of success leveraging GitOps in a non-traditional way. I'll give you 2 examples. I think GitOps has been really a game changer because it brings sort of all the process and things outside of Git and outside of traditionally a separate tool into where the action's at, and that's in the source code, right? So I think that's been big there. So two examples where we've leveraged a GitOps approach, we'll say, to help continuous delivery is one for managing a K8 cluster. So if you're a new team that wants to onboard onto the Kubernetes platform, you would essentially open a pull request to say, this is the team name, this is the engineers I would want on the team, here's the namespace, and here's the environments I would need. If there's enough automation in to take that pull request and apply that, good. If not, that pull request goes to whoever's running the platform, and they can approve that, and the pipeline will run and administer that. So that's one, and the other is sort of a just-in-time approvals, bringing in InfoSec or IT security into approval. So I think it's unfair to expect security to look at every single change that's happening and weigh in. If it's a simple change to UI, then security, probably doesn't need to weigh in. But if you're making a change and your Terraform code that's going to try to add a user or open something up. Having the pipeline be smart enough to say, hey, this is a risk, this is a potential security issue. Let's bring security in. So adding them in real time to the approvals, so you bring them to the table when needed, instead of opening up a ticket on a totally separate system that's so far disconnected, and you're asking for a manager who's disconnected from the works approval. Just again, bringing the approvers to where the action is happening. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but so really excited about this question.
And that's where, and that's one of the things that I do, is that I don't do any of the technology stuff, but what I try to do is be that intermediary between the people that are actually using it and some of these other, and I'm going to say it, bloated processes that we have for audits. I get the need for them, totally get the need for them. But if we're doing, CI/CD, that it's almost counterintuitive to then have these other, bloated processes trying to do something that we're doing, very fast paced and getting stuff out on the technology side. So one of the things that I, really try to do is, especially when we're talking about transformations, it's not just the IT org transformations. We need to look way beyond that. And we need to look at, who consumes and who interacts with our transformative technology. So if we look at our CI/CD pipeline, where's the flow? Where are those bottlenecks? Where are we going to have? And then what can we do to help improve their process? How can we tie them in? Exactly what you're talking about, Eric. Bring them closer to that, decision point, bringing them in, modifying maybe their flow, maybe what their process is. And then how can we leverage the work that's already been done? We don't need to have repetitive work. We can tap into so many of the brilliant minds that are already doing some of the work. Let's just figure out how to improve it, how we can, attach on, and how we can build, a better process end to end, not just with, the CI/CD and pushing out code, but the entire process of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same synergies as you guys. So the big thing that I'm working on right now is really marrying the DevOps process to the overall SDLC. And that goes from business idea all the way to delivery to your customers. And one of the things like on this journey that I've realized is, if you look at that DevOps Mobius strip, if the left-hand side where it's all about continuous integration, or the dev, that's really easy. We're really good at that. And typically like one team kind of owns the code and the evolution of that part of it. But when you look at the right side of it, right, the continuous deployment part of it, or delivery part of it, how many different teams are typically involved in that? What are the complicated processes that are involved with that? So that right-hand side of that movie strip is really what we're trying to reduce in complexity. So the big thing that we're looking at is automated infrastructure provisioning on branch. We're even looking at like just being able to have push button whole complete environments, and that are very, very specific to confidence building. So at one point in time, we'll build a release candidate, and a whole bunch of different environments will go up, one for security testing, one for pen testing, one for different auditing, one for whatever. And in parallel, if any one of those fail, we get instant feedback, right? We fail as fast as we possibly can, and we try to do it before we get to that right-hand side of the strip. So that's the technical part of what we're trying to do when it comes to bringing that into the organization and making it a little bit better.
Yes, I love that. I love all of your insights into where the business is focused on nowadays, because it's always super amazing to hear that all the things that we're talking about in this conference is really relevant to everyone. Things like policy as code, infrastructure provisioning, right, audit and governance. How do we manage all of that within this life cycle, within our CI/CD process as well? And I want to thank the three of you so much for joining us on this panel session and sharing all of your insights on continuous delivery and digital transformations, because this has been very insightful for me as well. I know that we're running out of time, so I do want to say thank you everyone for joining us. Please ask your questions on the side and we'll get to them. Without further ado, thank you all so much, and I'm going to close out here.